Hello everybody, my name is Professor Rich and today we're talking about difficult conversations in English. Now, as you might know, having difficult conversations is difficult in any language, in your own language. In another language, it's even more difficult. So today, I'm going to talk about managing difficult conversations in any language, but I will talk in a way that hopefully you guys can follow. So we should probably start with a fundamental question. A fundamental question. And that is, well, what exactly is a difficult conversation? What is a difficult conversation? Certainly not every conversation, right? Not by what we mean here, anyway. So we're talking about a specific type of difficult conversation. Can you think of a time when you had a difficult conversation and what made it difficult? Just have a little think about that. As Miro tells me that I can be first in line to try their new features. Anawat's giving an example here. He said meeting new customers for the first time. So, I don't think that meeting new customers for the first time is necessarily a difficult conversation, Anawat. It could be. Sonia has said it's when we have an opposite point of view. So, Sonia, that is part of it. That is part of it. Alexa says not being able to stand, or not being able to understand the other person. And Julia mentions that the person you interacted with didn't get your point. So, I'm going to give you a few points here. A few qualities that make a difficult conversation for our purposes. I'll basically be lecturing today, so you can treat this kind of like a lecture, an interactive lecture, where I'll talk to you about how to manage difficult conversations and you interact. If you have a notepad, then take your notepad and pen, and you can take notes while I'm talking. This is very much a lecture style class today. So, first of all, we're going to say that a difficult conversation has consequences. What I mean here is that from this difficult conversation, something important can happen. So, this is not simply a conversation about what's the best colour in the world. Is it red or green? A conversation like that doesn't really have any consequences. It's just a disagreement between friends, and maybe you could get quite annoyed, and maybe you would disagree strongly, but there's no real consequences to the conversation. If we say, what's the best colour in the world? Well, it doesn't really matter. So that doesn't have consequences. So we need to have a conversation that does have consequences. Consequences such as who made the mistake. Consequences such as who do we give the job to? Who do we hire from our candidates? How much money do we spend on the new project? What name shall we give to our baby? These are quite important consequences, and so this element makes a difficult conversation? This is element 1, that it has consequences. Let's move on to element number 2. So element number 2 is that you're not in agreement. So we may have a situation when we have a conversation and the conversation has consequences, but we agree. And obviously, if we agree, then it's not going to be a difficult conversation. If me and my wife decide that, yes, we shall call our first child Emmanuel, then, and we agree, then there is no problem with that. And it doesn't matter. It has consequences, but we're in agreement. However, in this situation, we're saying not in agreement. Finally, a difficult conversation involves strong emotions. So it's not just about disagreeing and having consequences, because actually, if we disagree and have consequences, we can still have a very reasonable conversation as long as everyone's calm. The problem is if people are not calm and they disagree and there are consequences, then we have a problem. So they are the 3 qualities of difficult conversations. I want you to remember those. Can you remember those now? Let's see if you can remember them now. Can you remember the 3 qualities of difficult conversations in this class? Type your answers into the chat. Let's see who's got a good memory. And while we're doing that, I would just like to say, for you guys watching on YouTube, make sure that you smash that like button, hit subscribe, and join us for future classes. Subscribing and smashing that like button is the best way that you can show your support, as well as sharing this video with any friends you have who are learning English. So, who can remember the three parts of a difficult conversation? What are the 3 qualities? And Sonia Bottarini, she's got the memory. Very good. Very consequences, strong emotion and disagreement. So it has consequences, we have strong emotion, and we disagree. That makes a problem. Well done, Alex. You've also got it there. We've got disagreement, negative emotions, and lack of logic. Lack of logic, disagreement, negative emotions, and lack of... Not lack of logic. Not lack of logic, Alex. It was consequences. Consequences, not in agreement, and strong emotions. I'm not sure where lack of logic come from. Lack of logic, I think, might be strong emotions, but you know, the thing is, and this is one of the important lessons of today, is that when strong emotions come into it, it doesn't matter if you have logic, because the logic goes out the window. Logic just goes with strong emotions, doesn't it? Logic is gone. So, really, it's not so much about lack of logic, but it's the presence of strong emotions. So there we have our definition today of what is a difficult conversation. And some lovely, lovely images of stickmen there. Now I'm going to give you 4 examples of conversations, and I would like you to tell me which of them are difficult conversations, and if they are not difficult conversations, why not? So look at each of the examples and tell me, why are each of these not difficult conversations? I have to go small for this one. So take a look at those examples. Are they difficult conversations? If not, why not? I'll just read these if there's anyone who's listening, just listening to the stream without looking. So the situations are: two friends argue about the best football team in the world. Two world leaders angrily agree to ban nuclear weapons. You and your friend are very hungry and a bit angry. You want to go to McDonald's and your friend wants to go to KFC. Actually, neither of you care much about where you go. And number 4, a husband and a wife are calmly disagreeing about what to call their new baby. So, I'm going to give you the spoiler. None of these are difficult conversations by our definition. None of them are. I want to know why. So, for each of them, I want to know why they are not a difficult conversation by our definition today. So why are each of these not a difficult conversation by our definition today? And Takeshi says, naming someone's difficult. Took me 10 minutes to be able to name my character in the game. Well, if it takes you 10 minutes to name your character in the game, Takeshi, it'll probably take you at least 11 minutes to name your children. Well done, Zoya. So for number 1, there's no consequences. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you come to. So the argument, you might be arguing, you might be passionate about it, but at the end of the day, there are no consequences. Unless you think there are consequences, then you might have a problem. Yes, number 2, the critical thing in number 2 is that the world leaders agree. So it doesn't matter that it's a consequential issue, and it doesn't matter that they are angry. If they agree, then it's not a difficult conversation. And you're right, Sleepwalker, that for number 4, there are no strong emotions because the husband and wife are calm. And finally, for number 3, since you and your friend don't really care if you go to McDonald's or KFC, then that's not a difficult conversation because you don't mind about the result. So there is no real consequence. Now, take a look at these examples now. In each case, there is a change. Two friends who support opposing teams argue about which expensive football match to buy tickets for. Number 2, two world leaders angrily disagree about nuclear weapons. Number 3, you and your friend are very hungry and a bit angry. You want to go to McDonald's and your friend wants to go to KFC. You are allergic to McDonald's fries and your friend hates chicken. And number 4, a husband and wife are shouting at each other about what to call their new baby. So in each case now, we can see that The conversation has changed, and now each of these conversations involves all three elements of a difficult conversation. They each have disagreement, consequence, and strong emotions. And now I think when we can read those, we can see and feel these situations would be very difficult. We would have a difficult conversation to deal with in those situations. So that's really the first step, is identifying a difficult conversation. And we can look at those today and we can say that those situations would be difficult conversations. So the question is, now that we know what a difficult conversation is, what does that mean for us? What do we actually do about it? Well, first, I need to give you a pre-conversation piece of advice. So before we even have our conversation, there's something we need to know. We need to know, what do you really want? And the reason why this is important to say, what do you really want, is because often people forget what they want. In fact, they don't actually forget what they want, but they start to move away from what they really want in the conversation. So when you're having a conversation, or when you're about to have a conversation, you need to really ask yourself, what is my purpose here? Why am I having this conversation? Right? Let's go back to the difficult conversations, and let's think about number 4. A husband and wife are shouting at each other about what to call their new baby. So it's important for us to think about, if we're in this situation, what do we want? Is it that we want to call our child a specific name? Is it that we don't want to call our child some other name that our partner wants? Is it that we're in a bad mood and we don't want to talk about names right now? Is it that we want to feel that we are contributing to the name of our child? Maybe we don't even care about the actual name. We just want to feel that we're invested in the decision. Or maybe there's something else. But the important thing is, you need to ask yourself, what do you really want? Because until you know what you really want, you have no hope of being successful in a conversation with someone getting what you want. And actually, often, when conversations become emotional, we completely lose track of what we want. So our original goal, whatever it is, disappears, and we start to argue for things that are actually not important at all. And this happens to all of us all the time. If you start to notice it, you'll notice yourself all the time wasting your time arguing about stuff that it's not really what you want to argue for. It's not really an important point. And we need to avoid that. So we need to focus on what we really want. Here's a good example, right? If I'm having a discussion with my wife about how the heating works, and I believe that she has a logical misunderstanding about how the heating works, and I start to push back at her understanding, but she's getting upset because actually for her, she doesn't really care that much how it works. She just wants to try using the heating in another way. So then we have a situation where both of us want something, but we're arguing for something different. She wants to try the heating in a different way. And what do I want? I don't know. I want to help educate her about how heating works. But instead, we end up in this rather pointless disagreement, which doesn't actually achieve either of those goals. And really, I have to also consider my goal of wanting a nice, peaceful, relaxing existence with my wife. And maybe when thinking about that, it's not so important whether I think in terms of physics, there has been a misunderstanding about how the heating works. So focusing on what you really want out of your conversations is super important. Now, the next thing is we want to go straight, take our awareness straight to that emotional meter. This is not only about keeping ourselves calm. I think most people recognize that in a difficult conversation, it's critical that you keep yourself calm. However, people who are very, very, very good at difficult conversations, they not only notice about themselves, keeping themselves calm, but they notice other people as well. So you start to notice when another person gets agitated, annoyed, starts to breathe a little bit faster. You start to notice these signs that someone else is starting to have a strong emotional reaction. And then if you want to be very good at having difficult conversations, you have to know how to help that person feel comfortable. That's what it's really about. It's about this feeling of comfort. And you might say, Rich, in the real world, people have to be uncomfortable. You can't expect to be comfortable all the time. Blah, blah, blah. Yes, actually, I totally agree. But we're not just talking about the real world here. We're currently talking about how to have very difficult conversations and how for you to be good at it. And for you to be very good at having difficult conversations, you have to know how to help the other person feel comfortable. So you have to recognize when another person stops feeling comfortable. Because once another person starts to have a strong emotional reaction in your discussion, it is no longer possible for you to have the conversation. So because they have had emotional reaction, you can't have the conversation. So you either need to deal with the emotional reaction or you just cannot have the conversation. That's it. You can't have a difficult conversation with someone who's having an emotional reaction. So you have to be able to bring them into a comfort zone. Recognizing that, I think, is very important. And there's a variety of strategies and things you can do to help someone feel comfort. I'm not an expert at this by any stretch of the imagination, but this would involve techniques such as helping someone save face. So you make it clear that someone is not to blame. Or it's trying to identify what someone's fear is. So why do they feel so afraid and threatened right now? You identify that fear and you calm it down. You say, no, it's not this. Don't worry, it's not that, right? Like if we go back to our examples, so we go back to our conversations from before, and if we think about, for example, the husband and wife shouting at each other about what to call their baby, it's very possible that there are certain insecurities coming in here which are causing the argument to happen. And if one person can identify those and call them out, then it will become a lot more of a calm conversation. For example, the wife might just have to say to the husband, look, I don't want to cut you out of the process. I'm not saying that you can't have an influence on the name of your child at all. It's just that the one particular name that you've chosen, I don't want that particular name because I had a very bad experience with someone who had that name before. But I don't want to cut you out, and I do want to listen to your opinions on what the name should be so we can keep talking. And if you don't like my suggestion that I just made, then we can talk more about it. So you can see, in saying something like that, then that wife, that person, she's addressing her husband's fear that he's getting annoyed because he's thinking, she never listens to me. And does she think that she can make all the decisions about the baby? And why aren't I involved more in the process, right? But if she can recognize those insecurities and mention them and say, look, don't worry about that stuff, that's not the issue for me, then there's a much higher chance that we can actually then have a conversation. And what I've started to learn in studying this subject, because I have actually been reading about this subject for 3 or 4 months now, what I've started to learn is that this really is a skill that you can become better at, which is both identifying these times when people feel threatened or emotional, and then you can find ways of making people feel comfortable or helping people to feel comfortable. Because a lot of the time when someone feels very emotional, it's because of an insecurity, it's because of not fully understanding each other. There's something missing in the communication. So, if we are able to get to the point that two people are sitting together to talk and they feel calm and they both feel calm, the listener is calm and the speaker is calm, and now we're ready to have our difficult conversation. So when we get to that point, then it's important to consider a technique of separating facts from story. So let me talk a bit about facts and story. Let's consider this. So Ming is one of my students. Every Wednesday and Thursday, he arrives 30 minutes late to class. He sometimes apologizes directly to me for this, but not always and not immediately. Okay? So let's consider that situation. We have Ming, who's one of my students. Every Wednesday and Thursday, he arrives 30 minutes late to class. He sometimes apologizes directly to me, but not always immediately. Right, so what do I think about that? Well, I think Ming seems disrespectful. He doesn't take the classes seriously. He has other priorities in his life other than the classes. Maybe it would be better for Ming if he didn't continue studying here, as he obviously has other more important commitments. Okay. So this is a huge story. This is an entirely a story. Actually, most of this is completely invented. There's very little fact in this. A lot of it is story. Now, story can still be true. It might still be true. All of this could be true. But we don't know. We don't have the fact, right? So we don't have the fact that Ming is a disrespectful person. We don't know that. What we know is he doesn't always apologize immediately. That's what we know. But we don't know the reason why. What we know is that he arrives late on certain days. But we don't know that he doesn't take the classes seriously. And we don't know that he has other priorities in his life. Actually, we don't know any of this. So, this is all story. So what we want to do is just break it down to the facts. Our story might be true, but we're not going to start with our story. Starting with your story is a good way to have a massive argument, right? You start your conversation. Ming, sometimes you act disrespectful, and I'm not sure that this course is a high enough priority in your life. If you start your conversation like that, you're going to upset him straight away, and you might be totally wrong. So we don't want to start with the story. We have to start with the facts, right? Hi, Ming. Right? I've noticed you arrive 30 minutes late every Tuesday and Wednesday. Also, you don't apologize until afterwards. So here we have facts. This is a fact. He arrives 30 minutes late every Tuesday and Wednesday. Fact. He doesn't apologize afterwards. Fact. No one can argue with that, right? Ming can't turn around and say, I don't arrive 30 minutes late. He can't say that because he does, right? It's a fact. And he can't say, I do apologize straight away, because he doesn't. So these are facts that we can't argue about, right? Now, at this point, we have a few options. So either we can start to tell our story, or we can ask Ming for his story. And if we're going to ask Ming for his story, we probably have to say why it's a problem. So why is this a problem for me? To be honest, most of the time you don't need a question to prompt at this point, because Ming will start to tell you anyway. But something like, could you tell me what the situation is from your perspective? I think that would be a helpful way of putting it. So you can see we've stayed with facts still. Arriving late means you often miss important parts of the class. That's true. Also, not apologizing sets a bad example for the other students. If Ming doesn't apologize, then maybe no one apologizes. And if no one apologizes, then nobody cares that they're coming to the class late. And then you have a bad atmosphere in the class where people can just turn up at any time. So we say that, and then we say, could you tell me what the situation is from your perspective? Now, at this point, we'll probably find out some things. We'll probably find out that Ming has a part-time job which he needs to support his study, and so he can't arrive on time on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, for example. And then Ming is from Vietnam and feels very shy in front of a group. Apologizing in front of a group is very difficult for him, so he would prefer to do it in person. Okay, so then we get some new information like this, and this is Ming's story. This is Ming's story. And as we can see, Ming's story is significantly different than our story from before. So, at this point, we can start to come up with quite a simple solution, right? Because now we have all the information and we think, oh, Ming isn't disrespectful. Actually, Ming's working really hard to study here because he's got this job and he's using the job to finance his study. And also, he doesn't mean to be offensive by not apologizing. It's just his culture that he feels shy in a group like that. So when we have this new understanding of Ming and his story, then we can tackle this in a new way then. Then we can say, oh, no problem. So what we'll do is I can explain to everyone so they can email me and we'll do our best to accommodate them as long as it's not too much time missed. And then I can say, for example, Ming will unfortunately be 30 minutes late on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. He has already apologized. He's already apologized for this, but I'm sure we can all be what's a good way of putting this? There we go. So now that I've found Ming's story, which seems to be the truth, or at least something that I can accept, completely different from my story, then we can come up with some sort of solution. And that process is the real trick, actually. That process is the real trick of having difficult conversations. It's that point of identifying the conversation, keeping calm, separate the story from the facts, state the facts, and then find the other person's story. And then you can actually have the conversation. Now, what I found amazing about this is you do this and you think, oh, now we're going to get to a situation where we actually have the argument, right? Because now Ming, let's say, for example, Ming has his story, I have my story, and we're going to have a fight about it. But actually, what normally happens is you find that really your story wasn't right. And now that you've spoke to the person about the facts and you've got the full story from them, you find that actually there's no problem really. This is just something we can quite easily solve. And a lot of the ideas you had in your head previously just weren't right. However, sometimes we do get to the stage when you do need to express your story if you find that the other person's story causes a problem still and doesn't seem quite right. So you've talked about the facts, they express a story, and you think that story doesn't fit with mine, then you have to tell your story. And I'm not going to talk a lot about this point. I'm just going to say a few bullet points about it, and I'm going to leave it there for now. So this is the advice for this sort of thing. Use I statements. So rather than saying, you made me feel this, or you did this problem, instead, you say, I felt bad when you did this, rather than you made me feel, or you did this to me, right? The thing you did was bad. You don't say that. You say, I felt bad about the thing you did. So you always use these I statements. So you're not giving objective judgment to someone. You're just talking about how you see things. It's your story. It's not the objective truth. You're sharing your story to let the other person know how you see things. Be concise. Stick to the point. And always watch for discomfort. Because if we ever get to a stage where someone feels uncomfortable, then you're back here. And if you're here, the conversation can't happen. If you're at this point, the conversation can't happen. So you need to remain with a nice, calm, comfortable environment. All right. So let me give you a little summary there of the steps. So here are the 9 steps that we talked about. Actually, we didn't talk about all 9. So if you didn't see all 9 of them, then fair enough. We talked about identifying difficult conversations. Focus on what you really want, because people always lose track of it. Recognize the warning signs. Maintain a comfortable environment. Separate facts from story. Express yourself clearly. Encourage others to share. I'm just going to swap those two, because I think it actually makes more sense to encourage others to share first and then express yourself clearly. So you want their story and then you share your story. Then the 2 points that we didn't actually talk about today, and I'm not going to talk about them, but I will leave them there so you can see them. So these steps from today are primarily from the book Crucial Conversations, which I highly recommend, and I have recommended in the past. So if you'd like to read more about them, you can read the book Crucial Conversations. As it stands, do we have any questions about those points before I ask you some questions? You're going to have a little quiz. Do you have any questions before the quiz? It was a difficult topic, actually, Shanze. The author, Zoya, there was a bunch of people. You know what? Let me get the book. By the way, the cover sucks. Whoever designed the cover for this book, you did a terrible job. The cover makes it look so boring, but it's such a great book. So there's the authors, Kerry Patterson, Joseph Grenny, Ron Macmillan, and Al Switzler. It's a combination of research. There's a lot of research that's gone into this book. So there are lots of academic references, for example. Lots of footnotes, references, and studies. So that's probably why so many people were involved in writing it, because really a lot of research and information has gone into the book. Well, Shanze, that was basically the class. Explaining about the book was kind of the class. So I can't really go through that again. But basically, this process here about having difficult conversations, that's what we just talked about today. All right, so let's have a little bit of a quiz. Let's have a little bit of a quiz. Just give me a moment to screw my head on because I've lost everything I was trying to do. Okay, I'm going to give you some questions here on the board. And let's see if you can remember the answers to these questions. Start with them, 1, 2, and 3. Let's go into the top right here. So, what does a tough conversation usually involve? Name a place where tough conversations often happen. And what should you do to stay focused during a tough conversation? And you have the options A, B, and C. So type your answers into the chat. What do you think? All right, let's see who got these right. Here come the answers. So the answer for number 1 is consequences. The answer for number 2 is at work. And the answer for number 3 is focus on what you really want. All right, let's move on to the next questions. So, question 4. Which is a warning sign in a tough conversation? Question 5. When you feel uncomfortable during a conversation, what is happening? And number 6. What is important to create before starting a tough conversation? Sleepwalker says CAA, which we have agreement from Shimi Nada and also from Sonia Butterini. That means it's probably quite common, probably quite likely. Let's have a look. So number 4, we have C, increasing volume. Number 5, we have A, warning signs are showing. And number 6, we have A comfortable environment. Let's move on to the next set of questions. So, question 7. What should the tone of conversation be to keep it comfortable? Number 9. What do we call personal interpretations in a conversation? And, number 8. And number 9, how can you differentiate facts from stories? Be careful, I just swapped 8 and 9. That might catch you out a little bit. I'm not actually sure what the ISA interview is, Alex, but I'm planning on doing an IELTS thing on Saturday. So I'm planning on doing an IELTS Zoom call thing on Saturday, if that's what you mean. All right, so let's have a look at some answers. What should the tone be? Of course, we want the tone to be calm and respectful. What do we call personal interpretations in a conversation? They are stories. And how can you differentiate facts from stories? You check if it's verifiable. The answers are B, B, B. Okay, let's move on. Question 10. When is it useful to express yourself clearly in a conversation? Number 11, what kind of statements help you avoid confrontation? Number 12, what does it mean to encourage others to share? And number 13, what skill shows you are paying attention when someone is speaking? And if you're just joining us today, you're probably wondering what on earth is going on. But anyway, while you're here, you should smash that like button, hit subscribe. And this is the best place for all of your regular wild English videos. So, for question number 1, it's always useful to express yourself clearly. In other words, you don't want to express yourself not clearly, do you? What kind of statements help you avoid confrontation? They are I statements. I statements help you avoid confrontation. I feel this isn't good. I felt bad about this. What does it mean to encourage others to share? It means let others speak. And what skill shows you're paying attention? That is active listening. Now, you remember active listening we spoke a little bit about last class when I talked about Cornell notes. Yeah, I agree. Some of these are kind of obvious, aren't they? Actually, a lot of them are obvious. We'll just do 4 more. These are the 4 last questions, and you will notice that we've jumped in numbers. So question 24, how do I statements benefit a conversation? 25, why is it important to differentiate facts and stories? Question 26, what should you encourage in a tough conversation? And question 27, how do you know if a conversation is becoming uncomfortable? Well done, Shanze. Partly these questions are designed to be kind of obvious because it's sort of a revision. It's kind of like, hey, you know the answer, right? And then when you get it, it reinforces your knowledge about it. But yeah, well done. You should listen to the lecture afterwards and see if it matches your understanding. All right, folks, you've just got a few minutes to finish that off. All right. So number 1, I statements express personal feelings without blame. Why is it important to differentiate to better manage emotional responses? A lot of having difficult conversations is about managing emotional responses. What should you encourage in a tough conversation? Of course, openness and expression, not silence. And how do you know if a conversation is becoming uncomfortable? You start to see warning signs. So look out for them. Because if you can notice that a difficult conversation is going to happen, then it can be really helpful, because then you can know that, well, I have to calm myself down and I have to keep the other person calm. If you can't do both, you have to do both. If you can't do both, then it means you can't have the conversation. That's the important thing. That's one of the most important things I realized about this, which is if the other person gets emotional or if I get emotional, we both fail. So if one person gets emotional, then we both fail. It means that neither of us can succeed in this difficult conversation now. So we have to make a situation where both people are able to remain comfortable. All right, everybody, that brings us to the end of today's class and into question time. So if you have any questions today about the class or about learning English, then you can download them from the link, which is right there. And in just a moment, I will paste that into the chat. And in just a moment after that... And in just a moment after that, I will put it in the link down below the video. And we're getting straight into it today with a question from Shanze, who says... Oh, sorry, Anawat first. Anawat, who says, do you need to have a special sense to acknowledge the warning signs in a tough conversation? No, I don't think so, Anawat. I want to be very clear about this. I am far from an expert. The reason why I'm reading books like this, and this is the 4th book that I have on the subject, but this one I've read several times because it's really good. But the reason why I'm reading stuff about this is because I suck at it, right? Traditionally, I have sucked at it. So I'm trying to get better. So I'm finding the best books, the best information on the subject. And this one is real good. Real good. You got to try it. So we don't need to have a special sense for sure. We don't. Unless you have a serious disability in this regard, such as having autism, which would mean it's very difficult to recognize the emotions of others. I think most people would have a chance. And you can see the signs, you know. You know what normally happens, actually? This is the thing, Anna. What normally happens is you go into a conversation, right? And the other person, like, reacts like a bit like, right? Like this, right? And then when they do that, instead of seeing this and saying, oh, they're getting upset, instead, what you go, what? Why are they getting upset? Right? And then when you do that, they go, and then you go, and then you have this exploding, argumentative, terrible situation, right? That's what I think very often happens in these situations. So it's that it all goes back to that initial thing right at the start, which is you start a conversation and the other person reacts like this. They react in kind of a not happy way, right? Now, when that happens, you look at that, okay? And instead of reacting like normal, you'd be like, what? You're getting annoyed? Well, I'm going to get annoyed, right? Instead, you stop and you go, oh, they don't feel safe. They feel threatened. That's why they've reacted like that. Something about what I just said caused a threat for them. It could be that they're stressed about something else. It could be that I didn't realize that this was something important. It could be that it's just a bad time, but for some reason, they felt uncomfortable. So what you do then is instead of reacting, don't react to that in an emotional way. Instead, you now make it your job to calm them down, right? You now make it your job to go, right, okay, what did they misinterpret? What was the problem here? Let me try and say that again, but in a different way. Oh, are you okay? You seem a bit stressed out. Would you like a cup of tea? And let's sit down and, maybe something I said, maybe you misinterpreted something I said there, or maybe something I said wasn't clear. Let's go back to the start of that, right? And Maria Del Carmen, of course, says, it's true, but theory is not easy to practice. That's right, Maria. But, what is interesting is I think a lot of people don't know the theory. It's true that it's difficult to practice, and I think it's always going to be difficult to practice. That's why it's called difficult conversations. But a lot of people don't know the theory. And actually, the more people that know the theory, the better. Because if this person also knows the theory, right? If everybody knows the theory, there's much more chance of success, because then you've got two people in a conversation who both want to keep each other calm. And if both people want to keep each other calm, then you really have a good chance of success. If both people don't know about keeping each other calm, and once one person goes, the other one goes, and they both go, right? Then you've just lost it. You're in monkey land. It's fight time, right? So this is some of the critical things that I've learned about this. All right. What if the other person starts to cry? Well, that's quite a specific situation, Sanze. I mean, if someone shows an emotional reaction that's just a slight emotional reaction that's negative, then the way you react is you take a big step back and calm things down. If someone cries, then I think you first of all, end the topic if possible, right? Move away from that topic, and you have to deal only with the emotions of that individual that you're dealing with. If it's a one-to-one conversation, then that's what you do. If it's like a group conversation and someone starts crying, then either the conversation has to continue without that person, or again, you stop the conversation and continue it another time. Depends how critical it is for that person's involvement. But basically, there is pretty much zero chance of successfully having a difficult conversation if someone is, crying because they're so upset. If someone's so upset that they're crying and you're trying to reach some sort of agreement, I mean, this is the problem as well, Shanze. If someone's crying, they might agree with you. They might just say, yeah, whatever, and agree with you, but that's not the kind of agreement you want. Because that kind of agreement is what we call, right? We have this false dichotomy. There's a false dichotomy, which is silence and violence, right? And both silence and violence are bad news, right? So what will happen is when people come to something they disagree with, then oftentimes they will go for silence or violence. Violence is not necessarily physical violence. It can just be attacking in any way. So in a verbal way, like, what is all this? Who do you think you are? Right? That would be like verbal violence. I really dislike the term violence used in this way, actually. But anyway, let's just go with the terms. That's the term they use here. I think I would prefer to call it aggression or something like that. But anyway, violence. And the other one, silence, is if someone just kind of doesn't say anything but looks annoyed, or if they're crying and they say, yeah, okay, whatever, that's what we'll do. Yeah, we'll name the baby Smith. Sure, it's fine. Just leave me alone, right? Yeah, okay, we'll name the baby Smith. Leave me alone. It's fine. That's silence. That is someone who's not happy, who disagrees, who feels very emotional, and then just doesn't want to go to violence, so they go to silence, which is they take their opinion out of it and they lie, basically, and say, yes, I agree with you. Forget this conversation. End it. I don't want to say anything. It's a problem, because this silence will lead to, it will come out, and it will often come out in things like passive aggressiveness, or violence at a later date. So, okay, this person is crying now, and she agrees now, and she's crying, and then next week, there's a knife in your back. Whoosh, right? Not literally, but, metaphorically, right? So the point is that the steam comes out somewhere, right? So we have to also watch out for this kind of situation. we need to get to the middle way. This is actually a false dichotomy. We want to get to the point where both people calmly express they feel heard and they come to an agreement. So not this idea that you go, okay, I agree with it, and you don't agree with it. That's not good. And then the other one is, your ideas are stupid, you're stupid, and I'm never going to agree to your nonsense. That's obviously the violent side of it. So we need to get away from both of those, ideally. Right, and we're moving on to a grammar question or something from Dan. He says, when should I use a singular and plural verb with a couple of gerunds? A singular and... Oh, look at the time. Oh, I have to be a little bit careful here. I might need to go in a minute, folks. Let me try and get through this. When should I use a singular verb and a plural verb with a couple of gerunds? For example, 1, learning and teaching English are easy. 2, expanding and improving vocabulary is a great challenge. When should I use a singular verb and plural verb with a couple of gerunds? Learning and teaching English are easy. Oh, I see. Learning and teaching English is easy. Learning and teaching English are easy. That's a real good question, Dan. I want to say, before I look this up, because I am going to have to look it up. Before I look this up, I want to say that there is some flexibility in this. But let's see what the standard answer is there. But I want to say that you actually have some choice there. And you do. You do. Right. Yeah, you do. So basically, Dan, it's down to your contextual focus. Do you think of learning and teaching as being a unified activity that you're putting under one banner? So is it the idea of learning and teaching as one thing, which is, by the way, is your choice to think about whether that's considered like one thing, right? Like fish and chips is a great meal, right? Fish and chips is a great meal. Or fish and chips are two things that go well together. So it's really the idea of whether I consider them, in that case, to be one unified thing. Fish and chips is a great meal. In this case, I'm thinking of fish and chips as being one unified meal. Fish and chips are great choices of two things which go together. Which in this case, I'm talking about them as two things which go together. So two independent things which go together. And you may also notice, incidentally, that in each case, we actually have that the object in one is singular and the object in the other is plural. Although that is related, that's not where it comes from. That's not where this idea comes from. Where it comes from is what is my contextual focus? Do I consider them, when I'm speaking, to be a singular, unified group or two independent things? All right? They're going up the hill and kicking a cow was terrible. That is definitely singular, Dan, because there's no case where that could be two independent things. Because they're going up the hill and kicking a cow. Oh, kicking a god. Kicking a cow was terrible. That has to be singular with was, because going up a hill and kicking a cow must be a singular thing, especially because of the way you've put it. But what if I say, okay. No, I'm not going to go there. Anyway, that one's singular. I don't care, Anna, unfortunately. You know what? It's so weird, but I've lost all interest in football. I can't really explain it. I used to like it, but just, I don't know. It became, I don't even know what to say. Yeah. Yes, of course. Great. Wonderful. Okay, and we've reached the end of the comments. All right, that's brilliant because I have to go now, folks. Thank you very much for joining me today. It's been my pleasure. My name is Professor Rich. On Saturday, we'll be doing IELTS. We'll be doing it live, and you can join in. So get ready for that. I will see you on Saturday. Have a lovely week, and I'll catch you next time.